All right, we're against 1700, and we'll play the Sicilian. And he goes for a McDonnell attack here. And the response to the McDonnell attack, with where they push an early f4, is d5. You're exerting equal control of the center here. And if he takes, then I like to play what's called the Tau gambit, which you put knight f6 because you're likely to win back that pawn anyway, because c4 is kind of discouraged there in that position. So now we have kind of an advanced variation. He pushes e5, and we can push like d4 here. We can push d4, kind of exerting that same like control. We can also develop normally. We can also still develop this knight via a knight h6 to knight f5 route, kind of like a French-like structure. But I like d4 because it prevents white from entering like an advanced French type structure with their pawn on f4, because they can't like do c3 and d4 themselves now. So d4 kind of like equally exerting my space over here on the queen side, which is kind of what the Sicilian is about in the first place, right? It's attacking on the queen side here. Now our opponent is likely probably, this also restricts his knight from coming out unless he develops in like a manner such as this. Bishop c4 will blunt the bishop with e6, I think, is a good response here. Pretty much automatic. It doesn't really weaken my position a lot because I probably want to push e6 anyway, so he doesn't have his own pawn up there at d6. The only issue is the bishop might be a little trapped, but it can also develop to this diagonal that's not a prospect, or it can move like d7, c6 here. So there's ways to develop this bishop that are not inhibited by e6, shall we say. Now we can start developing our king side. We can start developing our queen side here. Since white has chosen knight f3, it's probably fine to develop knight c6. And we have castles. All right, so now I'm going to develop knight h6 and to knight f5 here. We could also develop bishop e7, knight h6, knight f5 is the way we'll develop this knight since our opponent pushed e5. All right, he's playing d3, which is good. It's kind of like symmetrical here if you look at these pawns. But now his bishop is closed in and like this half of the board, I guess. We can continue with our plan, but I don't think there's like an immediate need to get this knight to f5 because it can also run into g4. We have to also decide where this bishop is going to get developed before we castle our king. And I think g6 and bishop g7, fianchettoing the bishop, is kind of weaker here because, I mean, both our pawns are on this diagonal. So I think this diagonal here is kind of just fine for the bishop for now. And we're getting it out of the way, at least, for castling. And if he leaves this square like open for us, we have a fork there. So now knight h5 or knight f5 here might be a decent move, but I think if you just look one step further, his knight is coming into to e4 here, and so that'll just add a defender to that square, and we wouldn't really want to do that in that instance, to put our knight there and trade for a pawn, because this pawn is going to probably get one back. So what can we do here? We can castle, we can play a6, trying to push b5 against that bishop. I think a6 is good. I think both options are good because a6 and b5 will allow us to develop the bishop. So let's push a6 first, because it's not like we have to immediately castle right now. I should realize, like, our king, he has no attack developed. He's not threatening to play g4 because we just take with a knight. Our knight is a little bit actually kind of useful there for preventing g4, and also we're planning to go into f5 at any moment. Knight e4 is a strong outpost for the knight, but we can still push b5 because this is defended by the bishop, and that's kind of pushing back the bishop, and it will give us more space on the board and also allow us to develop our bishop to this, I would say, optimal diagonal here. So we go with our plan. We play b5, develop our bishop, I would say is a good plan. And he plays a3, kind of preemptively giving his bishop space, I'll say. Because let's say we have knight a5 threatening his bishop, he can go back to a2. Knight a5 still may be a prospect in order to exchange our bishop here, but we might just want to keep the bishop on the board because it's kind of on a strong diagonal. The pieces can always move off that square, and it's still, eyeing towards the king. It does create a positional weakness, though, so it is a threat we can keep in mind. Let's castle here, go with our original plan, and then we could look at setting up further plans here. And his dark square bishop will have a little bit difficulty developing, as did ours. But ours is developed still to kind of a useful square, because if one of his knights jump to g5, we can take, and then always move this knight back to f5 if the pawn lands there. So we have bishop to d2, getting his bishop out and guarding this square, putting one defender on this square. We still have two defenders of this square. So I mean, we could push a5 here, looking to kind of break up the queen side. I think that may be a decent plan here. We could play knight a5, threatening the bishop, to take the bishop, and if the bishop drops back, we can play c4. But first we can play rook c8 to kind of like refine this plan, because we want basically as many pieces as possible protecting for that push. And still, if he takes the knight, we take with the queen, we won't be able to push unless we had that rook there. So he plays rook to c1, maybe anticipating some opening of this diagonal. So we'll go with our plan, knight a5, both threatening to create this positional weakness on e4 that we mentioned earlier, and also threatening to gain the bishop pair. If he drops back the bishop, we're threatening to play c4 here and start expanding our control of the board here. So c4 I think is a solid move. c4 I think is a solid move, but we could also even play bishop takes and then c4. However, I kind of still want to keep this bishop here. So let's try c4. And then my plan, how I calculated this initially, is I'm thinking to take with a pawn and get a couple of advanced pawns start going down the board. And if we can eventually get a pawn to like d3, for instance, we will just be like, I think, crushing here. And notice that if white tries to win this pawn through bishop takes, queen takes, and then knight takes on d4, we have this like pin here in response to that. And he might have to add defenders there, but I think that's not really a free pawn, because then we get the rook to d8 and he's having serious problems trying to defend it. The knight comes to f5, finally lands on its destination square. And I don't think in the long run, like I haven't even calculated it yet, but I don't think he could hold that knight in the long run. He doesn't have two attackers. We have two defenders. So we can pre-move that, because that's the only move we can make in response to knight takes a5. And then knight takes, to bishop takes a5. And then I think knight takes d4 here would be a mistake because of bishop to c5, pinning the knight to the queen, or the knight to the king. And then if his king moves, we play rook to d8, pinning it to the queen again. And then he can maybe play I think this is kind of a weak move, by reason of I think this pawn is going to eventually fall. I don't think there's any way that I can conceive that he's going to win this pawn back. So the sequence I'm calculating here is bishop takes d6, pawn takes back, and then queen to c5. And the reason I play queen to c5 is, let's see, maybe we want to take the bishop first. But let me explain the reasoning first behind queen to c5 is that I thought if he takes with a knight, it's pinned, and we can play knight f5 here, attacking both these pieces. But upon further inspection, I guess, if he takes with a queen, that is kind of just foiled. We can play knight to f5 there, but then he might be able to play c3. So maybe we could refine our plan with bishop takes, and then if queen takes, then we get rid of this knight here. We definitely want to get rid of this knight at some point. So I think starting by taking this knight cannot hurt. I don't think it can hurt, because we can always play bishop takes after. So we start because this is forced pretty much. And then there's also other interesting moves like queen to d5 there is another interesting idea. But my logic is telling me he cannot hold on to this pawn. Let's calculate. Bishop takes. Queen c8, he plays queen takes, knight comes there, we'll check, rook to, okay, queen takes, queen c5, we've got queen c5, queen takes, takes, d8. And I don't see a way he can add a defender or a useful spot for his knight. This also sets up further. Discoveries. And I think ultimately here, the ultimate end state is we just have a better position. As long as we don't blunder a pawn. And our knight is going to eventually get to f5 here. Our knight is going to get to f5, and our bishop is going to get to d5 most likely. And then preferably even our rook will get to the second file here. So we can play knight to g4, threatening this fork, but is it a one-move threat? We can reroute it to f3 via that threat. He is not threatening anything useful, I don't think, with this discovery. I think this would be a blunder because of knight takes. Yeah, I think it would be a blunder. I think, yeah, knight g4, and we're threatening to fork here. And if he defends that square, we can also reroute to a useful square here. Okay, he defends that square. I think we can reroute to a useful square, perhaps. But what is the ultimate destination of this knight? I'm looking at maybe, I didn't actually mean to move it that early, but I'm actually might be eyeing this square here. Can play bishop to d5 and then knight here. Rerouting the knight. Okay, he opens up position here. This might be a brilliant move. Knight to... No, it's not, because he just takes. And the issue with rook to d8 is he takes, we take back, bishop takes this, but then I think it's pretty devastating if we get our rook to the second rank here, so I think this might have been a mistake to actually remove the knight. because if he's trying to win this pawn here, if that's his end goal, I don't think it's worth my rook getting here and threatening both his knight and this with a bishop. I don't think it's worth it. That pawn is not worth it. 1700. All right, he correctly probably plays rook to d4. So I think he's trying to probably induce me to take and then recapture. If we take, he keeps the position closed. Then we can play bishop to c5 or to d5 here. Or maybe he wants to even take with a pawn, but I think that is probably risky for him. So I think we are kind of obligated to take. Okay. And now we can kind of keep the position closed. Because our knight is able to get in. And this bishop is very good on d5. It defends squares that the knight could jump into or go back to. And it defends this pawn. If he pushes his pawn, we just... I'm threatening to play knight e4. And knight e4, I think, is the route that makes my pieces, I guess, more active than him, because his bishop has just been back there this whole time. Where is he trying to reroute his knight to? Maybe to here? I think bishop... Now we can maybe reroute our bishop to this square, and then eventually get our rook in better. So I think we do this. We use the position of that knight there to reroute the bishop to defend the pawn from the rear. There is some danger to that move, though. There is a little bit of danger, and I'm looking at that. Let's see. I don't think this pawn is worth it here. After rook to... Because now he's allowing my rook to infiltrate here. After rook there, he can play rook takes. I think rook to d2 has to be good. I'm just playing this kind of intuitively because, I mean, I think capturing the pawn is like an ultra mega blunder of this. And then, well, and then my knight is getting in there as well. Yeah, I think he kind of had to do that. But we could even, I don't know, takes. I think it might be a blunder to take this. Well, Yeah, we're ignoring that, which is definitely, we don't want to blunder checkmate here. So that's why I calculated rook takes d1, knight takes d1, removing one of the attackers from this pawn. Then we can cement our bishop in, and maybe play knight to d5 here. Let's see, which way do we want to defend this? The reason I calculated bishop forward is so my knight can have this square which attacks this pawn with tempo, but he just plays this and defends the pawn. So maybe bishop back to d5 is more accurate. Because we can get our knight. Let's see. But then if bishop to d5, how do we defend this pawn from the knight coming back? Is the question. Knight to d4, and then we have a trade potentially if his knight comes back. Yeah. Because if he takes this pawn, then we get this pawn. I think this is pretty much the only way we can go forward here. So my initial instinct was probably correct. Okay. Do we want to take? I don't think we want to trade the bishop for the knight. And then we can have this check to reroute our knight. Let's see. What square do we want to leave our bishop on? We also don't even have to move our bishop. We could use this as a tempo to start getting our king out. But I'm kind of deathly afraid of these pawns. Let's move it to a square that attacks this. Let's see. And centralizes the bishop, attacks this pawn, and then if he moves forward, we can reroute the knight with tempo here. This also defends some knight jumps. And we can reroute the knight with tempo. Perhaps, or we could even go back to. But we're going to need to get our king out here. I think our king is going to have to move to the queen side here. And we are running slightly low on time, it would seem like. Not easy to calculate this endgame, I would say. Maybe we don't want to give the check and allow his king to... Maybe we actually want to go back to d5. But then his king can come out either way, so... Alright. We have knight goes back. And I think this might be a step in the wrong direction here. Alright, let's move... We want to move our king out. I'm not sure if this is the correct pathway to activate our king. But at least it's a pathway, and it puts another pawn on light squares here for his bishop. And if his king moves here now, we have this fork. Let's move our pawn up, make sure we don't lose the pawn. And if my king can somehow use some tempo to get over here to where his passed pawns are, I think we will be in good shape. Yeah, this is scary. I guess G6 was probably a mistake, because it's just a wasted tempo, which my king could have been using to move. But I think we're still okay, because this comes with tempo, and these squares are guarded by my bishop here. This bishop will have to return to there. Let's see. Bishop here takes. Here. Is there a way my knight can come in to interpose? I think this might be the winning move. But is there danger to me pinning the knight? No, because I think we return. Yeah, it's an interposition tactic. If it works, we'll see if it works. Interposition is what that's called. When you put a piece in between, like a defender of a piece and the piece you're attacking. And I think taking might be a mistake, because now we get the bishop for the knight. let's put our bishop along this diagonal and then use our king to try to win these pawns. I think if we win these pawns, he's just cooked. Okay, the knight is coming out. Gotta remember the knight is a pretty confusing piece. Let's move our pawn to a place where we're probably not blundering it to a fork. And then we'll use you can go here, and I think we go maybe bishop back and win these pawns. No, I think his king inactivity has caused me to... I don't think this is a draw anymore. I think I have the advantage. Takes, takes. Okay, and I think we're doing very well here, because I think we want to keep, we gotta choose which pawn we want to keep. I think we want to keep this one. The only thing is there a way to actually keep it? I'm going to move here and then get our king up, because after here we can then move our king in to gain opposition, hopefully. I think knight takes the blunder because my king is so far advanced now. I think, yeah, and he can't stop this. He can play a4. And this comes with check, so maybe he actually had a win there, but h4 was definitely the wrong move. I was thinking his king would go down to chase the pawn. We can pre-move that because that's the only avenue we have to queen. And then, yeah, because this square is... Yeah, I'll discuss that after the game, maybe after analysis. I don't know if I was actually winning that endgame, but it might have been a draw. But I thought with the bishop we had good chances because Yeah. It was like an excruciating kind of endgame. But 3 great, 20 best, 12 excellent. All right. Let's move into an analysis of the McDonnell attack here. So we have 1700 playing the McDonnell attack. The McDonnell attack is basically like, I would say, a weaker version of the Grand Prix attack. So for instance, you could play like Knight C3, which is closed Sicilian defense. And after like D6, then you push F4. And this is like a closed Sicilian Grand Prix variation. And the difference there is, the difference therein is that you have baited black basically to play D6 instead of D5, and they just have less control of the center, like objectively. A lot of times, black will also play Knight C6, and then you play F4. But either way, it's a Grand Prix attack. But when you play F4 on the second move, it's known as the McDonnell attack. The engine doesn't like it as much because, first off, I think just the Tau gambit here against the McDonnell attack is just really, really nice. The McDonnell Tau gambit, I mean, Tau is just a attacking genius here, but the point of it is that if they play C4, you actually sacrifice this pawn, and you get a lead in development, and this position is actually like a very good advantage for black. And yeah, if they don't try holding on to the pawn, then you're going to win the pawn back, and you still have like more like lead in development there. You basically equalized. So we'll go into what was played in the game. We played D5, and E takes D, of course, is like the book move going into what I would have played as the Tau gambit. E5 is actually like a true, I guess, McDonnell attack, because you push the pawn, you close down center. So we push D5, which made sense in my head. The engine actually doesn't like that move. Bishop to C4, we push E6, knight to F3, knight C6, castles, knight H6, and then D3 I thought was a little bit like pointless yet, because I mean there's no danger of me ever pushing D3, not yet, but I guess the point is to open up the bishop. I thought maybe, yeah, I guess he has to open up the bishop or get a square for his knight. I thought maybe knight A3 or something would have been slightly better. Bishop B7, knight D2, and then we get our attack on the queen side started with A6, knight E4, correct move by him, and then B5 is our way of creating this counter. And then, yeah, knight A5, I think we castled first. No, we played bishop B7, yeah, because that square is free for the bishop now. Castle, and then knight A5 after rook C8. I mean, the engine doesn't think it needs any more preparation. You just play knight A5 right off the back. Rook C8, prepared it, and then knight A5 is what we played. So now we got like a small lead, engine says, and the idea of that, of course, is to push C4 and also threatening the bishop. We're also opening up. I think knight A5 is a very good move despite how ugly it is, because we're threatening this. We're still, threatening to get our knight into this square if he trades off his bishop. We're preparing C4, and he moves bishop to A2. What? Knight to C... Oh. Knight to C4. the bishop likes, or the engine likes to move knight to c4. Because if bishop takes, we take, and then we gain this knight in the end. And white is just pretty much cooked. And what is it threatening? I guess it's threatening this bishop. And also, so when you remove the bishop, then you like cement your knight, your other knight, onto e3, which is a crazy continuation. That move was like not on my radar in the slightest. I thought I was, preparing c4. So we play c4. There, takes, and it's good for black here. We take, queen takes, knight takes, and I missed a tactic here. Bishop takes d6, we take back. And then bishop takes f3. Isn't this? No, I played queen c5. Bishop takes f3 was the other move I had in mind. And what was queen c5 after? Yeah, this is the other move sequence I had in mind. And I guess the reason that's so strong is it's setting up a discovery as well as the capture of this pawn here. And there's basically no way to defend this pawn. And I kind of had this sense that that was why that move was weakening. But queen takes d4 was I probably let him have chances here. Rook f to d8 was correct because this was a continuation I was calculating. Rook takes, yeah, rook back to d1, and then probably knight g5, knight g4 here. Yeah, knight g4, rook to e1, and then knight f6. I was just thinking somehow rerouting our knight back. Knight goes back. Rook to d8 is a mistake. Interesting. What would have been stronger? Rook to b6. Counterattacking here. Because this square is guarded by our knight. Interesting. We take... Yeah, rook to d4 was probably the strongest continuation to keep it closed. Bishop to d5. Bishop to e4. Knight e3. Rook d2. Rook d1. We trade. And then I think objectively this... Yeah, knight e3 again. And then he was winning, I guess, this endgame. Because of the... Yeah, I was terrified of this pawn majority on the queen side. But eventually, I think his mistake was he traded this bishop for my knight. And that allowed me to have this bishop to guard the key light squares that lead to promotion on the queen side here. So yeah, g3 was probably weak, I would say. I think I would, yeah, my other candidate move was just walking the king over. Trade. And then I think he actually blundered maybe even a winning position at the very end. Or maybe a draw. Yeah, I think he blundered a draw here because after his king gets to this square, and then I move king c2, he can actually move here, and then I just have to move back to c3, and then he has to move, and then he goes back to, yeah, back to e2, threatening to get on d1 and block the promotion, and it's just repetition. Just the kings are just dancing here. But yeah, a4 definitely a miscalculation because now I can just push my pawn down and queen. And his queen, I get a check along the way is the key thing, because if this move like did not come with check and he was able to just move this queen, we'd get queens at the same time, but since it comes with check, he has to move away. And he moves h6, and then we queen h7, and we get our queen down to d1 to block his promotion. And then, yeah, there's unstoppable checkmate because I have a queen, and he will never have a queen. So that was our game against a 1700. There were some inaccuracies, but I'm glad this game was like more fruitful than the other game we had in this video where the opponent was just playing checkers or something. But that's, I guess, a McDonnell attack. And hope you enjoyed my take on the McDonnell attack. All right.